Hello dear students, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today we will discuss few very important news articles. Before discussing all those important news articles, let's try to solve yesterday's practice question. So the question was, which of the following statements accurately describes nationally determined contributions? So we all know that the nationally determined contributions are also known as NDCs or INDCs. So they are actually the voluntary pledges of different countries, and those voluntary pledges are primarily aimed to curb the emissions. Okay, so the correct answer for this question is B. So NDCs are voluntary commitments made by different countries to reduce the greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases in the sense that, for example, carbon dioxide and even methane is a greenhouse gas, and apart from methane, we also have another greenhouse gas such as nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, and several other greenhouse gases, right? So voluntary commitments made by countries to reduce the greenhouse gases and to adapt to climate change impacts. So now it is very important that climate change is a concern for all of us. Okay, so climate change has led to several negative consequences, such as a regular change in the weather patterns, and that includes erratic rainfall that we see regularly. And erratic rainfall and heat waves are becoming more intense and more frequent in different parts of the world. And we also very often see droughts and floods. So all these factors, apart from that, the wildfires, all those things are responsible for increasing global temperatures. Now, increasing global temperatures and the climate change has also been a leading factor for the extinction of different species. So in order to curb the emissions, the governments have come up with the voluntary commitments, and those voluntary commitments are known as intended nationally determined contributions, right? So they are known as intended nationally determined contributions. Now first, understand the nationally determined contributions are voluntary commitments. So those commitments are made by different countries as part of the climate pledges. So we all know that the Paris Agreement was signed by different countries, and the Paris Agreement is primarily aimed to curb the global temperatures or limit the global temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius. If possible, 1.5 degrees Celsius, maximum below 2 degrees Celsius. Secondly, so these commitments are primarily outline the actions that each country intends to take to address the climate change, right? So these pledges or these commitments are actually outlining the actions of different countries that each country intends to take to address the existing climate change. So apart from that, it includes several targets for reducing greenhouse gases or emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and at the same time adapting to the impacts of climate change. Now when we talk about climate change, adaptation and mitigation are very important. Now climate change is very often coming up with the changes in the existing weather patterns and changes in the existing climate. So therefore, for example, if I can talk about agriculture sector, so agriculture sector has to adopt to the negative changes of climate change, and at the same time it should be able to mitigate those negative changes by adaptations. For example, we can cultivate millets, because millets, they can be cultivated in higher temperatures also, and at the same time they are not water intensive crops or water guzzling crops. So we can meet the objectives of food security for the people, and we can also ensure the nutritional security for the people. Okay, so this is having a lot of benefits, and this comes under the climate change mitigation and adaptation. Now INDCs or nationally determined contributions are primarily aimed to address this particular aspect, climate change, and also develop the adaptation and mitigation. So unlike the legally binding agreements, for example, there are several legally binding agreements. There are a lot of conventions which are legally binding. So unlike several legally binding agreements, if you look at these nationally determined contributions, so they are voluntary in nature, right? So they are voluntary in nature, and countries can voluntarily declare their nationally determined contributions. Right? Countries can voluntarily declare their nationally determined contributions. So unlike the legally binding agreements, NDCs are determined by each individual country, and it is based on their national circumstances, capabilities, and the priorities of those respective countries. For example, if you look at the developed countries and the developing countries, so different countries have the different capabilities, different circumstances. So therefore, the mitigation or the commitments, the voluntary commitments under the nationally determined contributions are actually based on circumstances, capabilities, and priorities of these different countries. So while Paris Agreement itself is actually a legally binding international agreement or international treaty, however, the nationally determined contributions themselves are not legally binding obligations. So they are not legally binding obligations. On the other hand, the Paris Agreement is considered as a legally binding agreement, and that is aimed to limit the temperatures by 1.5 degrees Celsius if possible before the free industrial level, and maximum 2 degrees Celsius. Now let's go to the today's practice question. The question is Janskar Valley, which was in use recently, and it is located in which of the following states? First, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu, Ladakh, and Sikkim. So please answer this question in the comment section. Now let's try to discuss a few very important news articles that are covered in the Hindu newspaper. So the first news article is about boys can learn Mohiniyattam at Kala Mandapam. So we all know that Mohiniyattam is a classical dance from Kerala. Right? So it is a classical dance, one of the classical dance from Kerala. Now earlier the Mohiniyattam dance was only performed by the female artists. However, now it is decided that the male artists can also practice Mohiniyattam classical dance form. Right? So this was decided by the governing council. So now in this context we will understand what exactly is the Mohiniyattam and what are its basic features. So we will understand this in a very detailed manner, because classical dances are also very important for UPSC Prelims examination. So in a historic move, the Kerala Kala Mandalam has decided to lift a ban on males studying Mohiniyattam. So earlier there was a ban on males studying or performing Mohiniyattam. So earlier also this particular Mohiniyattam dance form is performed by the female artists only. However, the Kala Mandalam of Kerala has lifted ban on male artists performing studying Mohiniyattam. Now if you can talk about some details regarding Mohiniyattam, so it is one of the 8 classical dances of India. So there are 8 classical dances or dance forms in India, and Mohiniyattam is known as one of the classical dance forms out of 8 of classical dances. And these classical dances are developed and remained popular in the states like Kerala. And apart from that, the Mohiniyattam dance gets its actual name from the word called Mohini. So Mohini is an avatar of God Vishnu, right? So the Mohiniyattam dance form derived its name from a word called Mohini. So here Mohini actually means that, So Mohini actually means that a Hindu god Vishnu. So Vishnu helps good prevail over evil by developing her feminine powers, right? So this is actual the reason of Mohiniyattam origin. Now if you look at the roots of the dance form like Mohiniyattam, so it is all classical Indian dances, right? So all classical dances are primarily derived from a text called Natya Sastra. Okay, so there was a Natya Sastra book. So this is a Sanskrit book, right? So this Natya Sastra was written in Sanskrit language, right? So like all classical Indian dances, so such as Kuchipudi, Bharatanatyam, and all those classical dances are primarily derived from the Natya Shastra. Okay, clear? Now this is ancient Hindu Sanskrit text and that have details of performing arts. However, the Mohiniyattam performs a style called Lasia Style. Okay, so the style which is depicted in Mohiniyattam dance is known as Lasia Style, and this particular Lasia Style was also described in Natya Shastra, a book on performing arts. Okay, so this Lasia Style essentially means that a delicate and feminine performance of the artist. Okay, so that is Lasia Style. Now when I say the delicate and feminine performance of an artist, the delicate body movements and subtle facial expressions. Okay, so in Mohiniyattam, the performing artist very often show a delicate body movements. Okay, so he very often show delicate body movements and at the same time the subtle facial expressions, and they are more feminine in nature and therefore they are ideally suited for performance by the woman, right? So they are very often ideally suited for the performance by women. So there are certain costumes which are being used in the performance of Mohiniyattam dance. So those costumes include plain white or off-white, such as ivory. Now if you look at the costumes of the dancers who are performing the Mohiniyattam dance, so they very often wear costume of plain white or off-white. So off-white includes ivory or cream colored sari, and that particular sari is very often embroidered with a bright golden or gold laced colored brocade. Okay, so you can see here a white colored sari with a golden or gold laced colored brocade. Okay, so this is actually a very often similar to the Kasavu sari that is being wore by women during ceremonies. However, there are few musical instruments that are being used in the Mohiniyattam dance. So the musical instruments include first, vocal music of Mohiniyattam involves various rhythms. Okay, so the dance is actually performed in various rhythms, and the musical instruments usually used in Mohiniyattam are mridangam or maddalam. Okay, so and idakka or hourglass drum, flute, veena, and cymbals. Okay, so these are the major musical instruments. So please remember, previously UPSC has also asked about the Manipuri Sankirtana and the instruments which are being used in the Manipuri Sankirtana. So therefore the instruments in Mohiniyattam dance are also very important for the exam. So there are several ragas, they are rendered in the Sopana steps. Okay, Sopana style. So Sopana style is steps like a performance. So which a slow melodic style with roots in the Natya Shastra. Okay, so earlier I have told you that there are 8 Indian classical dance forms. So the classical dance forms include Bharatanatyam. This is a classical dance form from Tamil Nadu. And Kathak is also a classical dance from Kerala, the state called Kerala. And then Kuchipudi from Andhra Pradesh, Odissi from Odisha, and Kathakali from Kerala again, Kerala, Satriya dance, Manipuri, and Mohiniyattam. Mohiniyattam is also from Kerala, Manipuri is from Manipur, Satriya is from Assam. Okay, so these are 8 classical dance forms that we found, and Mohiniyattam is one among the 8 classical dance forms. Okay, so that's all about the Mohiniyattam dance. And the second very important news article is that government recently notified the revised wages. The revised wages for Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Okay, so we all know that through the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, government provide unskilled waged employment to every rural household who is seeking work. So under MNREGA, the government will provide 100 days legally guaranteed work for every rural household. Okay, so 100 days of legally guaranteed work for every rural household would be provided through the MNREGA. When MNREGA workers are working, they also require wages. So here the central government decide wages for the MNREGA workers in different states. Okay, based on the inflation criteria in different states, the central government decide wages for the workers in different states. And also understand the MNREGA workers very often work in creating the community resources. Okay, they create the community resources. And this is how MNREGA actually works. So recently, the central government has notified the revised wages of MNREGA workers. Now, if you look at the image carefully, Goa has seen highest percentage increase in the MNREGA workers in the financial year 23-24. The wages of MNREGA worker is 322 rupees, but the government has increased in this financial year to 356. So therefore Goa has got the highest increase in the wages of MNREGA workers, followed by Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Chhattisgarh. So on the other side, there are states which have seen a lowest hike in the wages of MNREGA workers. So for example, if you look at Rajasthan, so this particular state has got an increase of just 4.31%. So in the financial year 23-24, it is 255 rupees, and in the financial year 24-25, it is 266 rupees, just 4.31% increase. So it is said that Uttarakhand has seen the lowest, followed by UP. Okay, so these states have seen the lowest percentage increase in the wages of MNREGA workers. Now, if we can talk about this particular news article, so the central government has notified new wage rates for the unskilled manual workers. Please remember, under the MNREGA Act of 2005, the government will provide 100 days of legal guarantee of work, 100 days of legal guarantee of work to every rural poor household. And those are unskilled manual workers. So the central government has increased wages for unskilled manual workers under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. So this has been increased for the year 2024, financial year 24 and 25. So if you look at the data, Goa has seen the maximum increase or maximum hike of 10.56% in the total wages. On the other hand, Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand have recorded the lowest wage increase of just 3.04 each. And apart from that, new wage rates are notified by Ministry of Rural Development under subsection 1 of section 6 of the MNREGA Act. So these wage rates are actually notified by the central government, particularly Ministry of Rural Development under subsection 1 of section 6 of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005, and this particular increased wage rate will become effective from April 1st, 2024. However, as per the government notification with respect to the increasing wages of MNREGA workers, the highest rate of NREGA wage, the highest paid NREGA wages is 374 rupees per day has been fixed for Haryana, and the lowest is for Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland, that is just 234 per day. Now you need to understand the difference between earlier we have told you that Goa has got the highest percentage of wage increase, so that is in terms of percentage. So Goa has got the highest percentage of wage increase, but on the other hand Haryana has the highest wages, so that is 374 rupees. Now on the other hand, Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland have the lowest MNREGA wages. So the central government actually fixes state-wise wage rates for NREGA workers. Okay, so central government actually fixes the wages of MNREGA workers across different states under subsection 1 section 6 of the MNREGA Act 2005 that we have already discussed in the previous slide. So NREGA wage rates are fixed according to the changes in the consumer price index agriculture labor. Okay, so the MNREGA wages are actually fixed based on the consumer price index agriculture labor. Now, which actually reflects an increase in the inflation in the rural areas. So in case of there is an increase in inflation means so increase in the prices of few commodities. So based on that, the central government would also increase the wages. Okay, so last week ministry had sought the permission from the Election Commission notifying revised NREGA wages. Okay, so Election Commission has notified the revised NREGA wages for the next financial year, which the poll panel had granted. Okay, now in this context, we will understand briefly what is MNREGA. Okay, so MNREGA is an abbreviation for the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005. Very simple. Now, firstly, we will understand it is actually a law that was passed in the year 2005 by the Indian government. So this particular law has also mandate and it guarantees a right to work for the rural citizens. So unskilled manual labor in the rural areas, they can seek 100 days of work under the MNREGA. Secondly, under this, the government has assured a minimum of 100 days of unskilled manual work an adult member of an eligible rural household. So every eligible rural household, adult rural household, is eligible for 100 days legal guarantee of work. So that is unskilled manual labor work would be provided by the government, and the wages are also announced by the central government. So the main objective of MNREGA is to provide employment to rural citizens and improve their overall economic conditions. Especially we need to talk about the livelihood security for the rural poor, and at the same time providing income security also for the rural poor. And apart from livelihood security and income security, it will also prevent the migration of people from rural areas to urban areas. And at the same time, during COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a phenomenon called reverse migration, where people from the urban areas have started migrating to the rural areas. So during the reverse migration times also, MNREGA have become a key employment provider in the rural areas. Okay, so that is how they are able to cope up with the unemployment and poverty. Now the next very important news article is with respect to India making a progress with respect to elimination of TB. So remember, we have several targets, that is TB Mukt Bharat by the year 2025. So even though we have a lot of goals with respect to elimination and eradication of TB from our country, but the progress that is being made in this respect is not that much effective. So however, recently there was some data reveals that India achieves 16% decline in the new TB cases. Okay, so new TB cases since 2015. Okay, since 2015 India has reduced the TB cases by 16%. Okay, so India achieves 16% decline in new TB cases and 18% reduction in mortality since 2015. So the incidence rate in India had fallen from 237 per lakh population in 2015 and 199 per lakh population in the year 2022. Okay, so this is a significant decline in terms of number of people who are impacted with the tuberculosis. And at the same time, the mortality rate, the people who are died because of TB infection, the mortality rate has also declined from 28 per lakh population in 2015 and 23 lakh per lakh population in 2022. Okay, so these are some statistics with respect to the tuberculosis disease. Now, what about tuberculosis disease? What exactly is the tuberculosis disease? So we have understood some data that India has made some progress that the TB infection rate has declined by 16% compared to the 2015 levels. Now in this context, we will understand what exactly is the tuberculosis. So tuberculosis is a bacterial infection, right? So it is an infection caused by bacteria called tuberculosis, that is tuberculosis bacteria, and it actually spreads through inhaling the tiny droplets from the cough and sneezes of an infected person. For example, if you are frequently in contact with an exposed person or infected person, through tiny droplets from cough and sneezes, you will also get impacted by the TB bacteria. And tuberculosis mainly impact lungs of people, and at the same time it can also affect any part of the body, and that includes the abdomen, glands, bones, and even the nervous system also. So apart from that, the tuberculosis is potentially a serious condition, right? But it can be cured if it's treated within time and with right antibiotics. Now TB bacteria developing the antimicrobial resistance is also a challenge. Now antimicrobial resistance means that the TB drugs are no longer effective for the TB disease. Now imagine one particular individual, he is infected with the TB, and TB bacteria has developed the antimicrobial resistance, and he starts taking the drugs, and drugs are not impactful. So drugs are not effective in curing the TB disease. Since it is a chronic disease, it further weakens the immunity of a person, and thereby the mortality chances are very high. So this is how the TB actually impacts an individual. So there are a lot of symptoms that are being associated with the tuberculosis. For example, when we talk about the respiratory symptoms, there's chest pain and even coughing with blood. And apart from that, the central, it also impacts the brain, and it also have several other symptoms. Okay. Now there are different types of TB. That is actually 3 types of TB. First, pulmonary TB. Okay, so a TB that affects the lungs of individuals. So that is known as pulmonary TB, and it is most contagious type of TB. However, it usually spreads only through a prolonged exposure to someone with illness. So if there are someone with the TB disease, and the other individual have frequently in contact with the already infected individual, it could spread to the other healthy individual also. So in most healthy people, the body's natural defense against the infection and illness, it kills the bacteria and there are no symptoms. So in pulmonary TB, for example, if it is infecting a healthy individual, then there will be no symptoms, and the body's immunity system is effective enough to kill the TB bacteria. So therefore, the pulmonary TB is not that much dangerous. And secondly, we need to talk about the latent TB. Now latent TB is sometimes the immune system of human beings, they cannot kill the bacteria. Right? So the immune system of people cannot kill the bacteria, but it manages to prevent it spreading in the body. Okay, so the immune system can prevent the spread of TB bacteria in the body, and you will not have any symptoms with respect to the TB, and at the same time the bacteria will remain in your body, and this is known as latent TB or latent phase. So you will not show any symptoms, and the bacteria still remains in your body, and that is known as latent TB. And apart from that, people with latent TB are not infectious to others. So they will not infect the TB disease to others. And after that, there is also a third category of TB, that is active TB. So in active TB, the immune system fails to kill or contain the infection. So immune system will not be able to suppress the TB. So it can spread within the lungs and other parts of the body, and symptoms will develop within few weeks to few months, and this is known as the active TB, and it is also most dangerous TB variety. Okay, so about 1/4 of the world's population is actually estimated to be infected by the TB bacteria. a number of people who are being infected with the TB bacteria are actually belong to the active TB, because first two categories of TB are not that much impactful, and body's immune system can manage first two, latent TB, and also the other variety, pulmonary TB varieties, can be managed by the immunity system of the body. So only 5 to 15% of the people will fall ill with active TB disease, and this also very dangerous, and it even causes large scale mortality among the people. So however, there are certain measures that can be undertaken to prevent the spread of TB and at the same time reduce mortality. So firstly, we need to talk about the systematic screening of people, and early diagnosis of the disease is very important, and for that particular purpose ASHA workers and ANMs have a huge potential where we could strengthen the community healthcare system. Secondly, engagement of first contact providers. So again, ASHA and ANMs. Third, elimination of suboptimal tests. So diagnosis should be foolproof. It should be more effective, and we need to scale up the WHO endorsed tests for diagnosing TB. Now, when we diagnose the TB at an early phase, so we can come up with adequate and appropriate interventions that could help in preventing the spread of TB disease. And apart from that, point of care testing programs should also be undertaken, and we need to use latest technologies in for preventing the further spread of the TB disease. Now, the next very important news article is Australia's carbon credit. Carbon credit is a scheme of catastrophe. Now, before actually discussing this, we will understand what exactly is the carbon credit program. Now, carbon credit program is part of countries' commitment to reduce greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide. Right? So in carbon credit program, generally what happens, the companies, the private companies, individuals and communities, they can take part in the green projects. Okay, for example, a community has been engaged or individual has been engaged in the afforestation drive. Okay, so afforestation drive. So this afforestation drive ensures that the CO2 emissions are being absorbed, thereby reducing the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So in order to appreciate what the community or individual has done with respect to mitigating the CO2 or absorbing the CO2 through afforestation, he would be given one carbon credit, and this carbon credit can be tradable in the market. Okay, so they are tradable instruments, and that are being provided to recognize the positive environmental contribution of communities, individuals, and different private companies. So recently there was a study, and that study found that world leading reforestation project under Australia Carbon Credit Unit scheme had been an underperforming catastrophe. So that was a catastrophe because that has not been giving positive results in terms of afforestation and regeneration of the natural forests. And this is what the study has been found. Now we will understand the Australia Carbon Credit scheme. So it is actually a key part of Australian carbon market, and it actually encourages individuals, businesses, and communities to undertake or to take up projects. Those projects reduces emissions and they also store the carbon. Okay, so individuals, sole traders, companies, local and state and territory government bodies, trusts, all these different types of individuals, organizations, institutions can take part in the Australian Carbon Credit Unit. Now in this context, it can be achieved by using new technologies. They can use new technologies. They can upgrade their existing equipments, changing business practices to improve the productivity and energy efficiency of those industries, and changing the way vegetation is being managed. So thereby providing an incentive in the name of carbon credit. So carbon credit as an incentive which is being provided to the individuals under the carbon credit scheme. Now, how does this carbon credit scheme actually works? So, for example, participants who run the projects and those projects reduce or avoid the greenhouse gas emissions. So, I will explain you this clearly. For example, afforestation drive is being undertaken, and with the afforestation drive, what happens? A large scale plantation of forest takes place. Now, industries emit the carbon dioxide, that is CO2, and this particular CO2 would be absorbed by the plants, thereby removing the excess carbon and mitigating the negative impact of releasing excess carbon. So because of that reason, it is said that they reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions or emission avoidance, and they remove and store carbon from the atmosphere through the sequestration. So when the carbon is absorbed by the trees, it is known as carbon sequestration. So in this, participants can earn 1 carbon credit for every ton of carbon dioxide equivalent of emissions absorbed by their projects or the project stores or avoids. For example, imagine if there is an individual and this individual has planted trees of 1 acre or 1 hectare, and this 1 acre plants have been reducing 1 ton of CO2 or absorbing 1 ton of CO2 from the atmosphere. Now he will be awarded 1 carbon credit by the government. So he will be given 1 carbon credit by the government, and now he can use this carbon credit to earn some money. Okay, so these carbon credits can be sold in the secondary market or to the Australian government by entering into the carbon abatement contract. So however, this particular program has been facing a lot of criticism. Why it has been facing criticism? Because they are planting trees as per this program, but those trees are not regenerating as a natural forest. Most of these forests are degrading the existing ecosystems. So the research has actually found that across almost 80% of the native forests in the deserts of Australia, and the forest growth was either stagnant or woodlands were further shrinking. So therefore, this carbon credit program is actually not effective. In fact, it has been impacting the existing ecosystems also. Because of that reason, it is being increasingly criticized. Okay, so that's all in this today lecture. So please like the video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.